Welcome into OutKick the show. I am your fearless leader, Clay Travis. I appreciate all of you hanging out with us. I've been all over South Florida the past several days. Good to be back home for a couple of days. I'm about to head down to the Georgia-Alabama game for Big Noon, biggest game of the weekend in college football. I would argue probably the biggest game of the season so far in college football. A lot of big games still to come. We got chaos at UNLV with their quarterback, but I think it's actually representative of the chaos that exists right now in college football. Nearly even gambling odds, the latest on Trump as we prepare to go under 40 days, the Trump-Kamala race. I will share with you the absolute latest there. Why is Joe Biden suddenly back out on the scene? Fascinating. I've got a theory. He was on The View today. We will discuss. And a little bit of a preview. We're doing, Kelly Stewart and I are the gambling show for the Fade, taping it today because she's down in Florida and might get hit by this hurricane in terms of power getting knocked out or whatever else. There will also be NFL and college football gambling picks up for you soon. But let me start here. Georgia-Bama, biggest game of the weekend, biggest game of the season. I cannot wait to see what happens in this game. President Trump is going to be at the game, maybe doing some things with him, details to come. But Alabama, under Nick Saban, by and large, beat Kirby Smart almost every time they played. I believe Alabama, Adam, you can correct me on this if I'm wrong, I believe Alabama is 8-1 against Kirby Smart since he got to Georgia. Now, to be fair to Georgia fans, the one victory, I believe, is the national championship game. So that counts for a lot, right? Now, last year, losing in the SEC championship game counted for a lot because Georgia might have been the best team in college football last year. They lost. They got knocked out. Certainly, Alabama got the win over Kirby. I was there in person in Atlanta on the late Tua touchdown pass to Devontae Smith in overtime. Second and 26, I believe it was, when they hit that play. Maybe it was third and 26. I don't remember exactly, but hit that play for the win down in Atlanta. So there have been not only a lot of Alabama wins, there have been a lot of consequential Alabama wins, SEC championships, national championships at stake, and Georgia has gotten one of them. What do I expect to see happen? Right now, as I speak to you, let me check the absolute latest on the line. I'm going to pull it up. The last that I saw was that Georgia was a 2.5-point road favorite, making Alabama the home underdog for the first time since George W. Bush was in office, which is a crazy stat to think about. And that's how long it's been since basically since Nick Saban came to Alabama, since the Crimson Tide has been an underdog. The number sticking right at 2.5. Georgia, 2.5-point favorite over Alabama. This is Vegas. This is the books begging you to come in and take Georgia because they believe Georgia is going to come back and beat Alabama by more than a field goal. Because I think most people are going to do what I'm doing. I'm taking Alabama to win. I think Alabama is going to win this game outright. I don't think they're just going to cover the 2.5. I think Alabama wins a low-scoring game. Couple of early picks for you. I'm taking the under. Kirby Smart 1-5 against Bama. Georgia has lost 8 of its last 9, so all those may not have been Kirby. I am taking Alabama plus the points, and I am taking the under 48.5 in this football game. Now, again, I will be on Big Noon. I'm going to take Bama plus the points. I will be down there as a fan as well. I'm going to be sitting in the crowd. I don't like going to the press box that much anymore. Frankly, if I'm going to a game and I'm staying for a game, I would rather watch it in the crowd. I'm going to be there with my 14-year-old, my 8th grader, who has unfortunately become a big Alabama fan. But the last time Trump was at Alabama was the classic 2019 LSU against Alabama game, one of the best college football games I've ever seen in person. Joe Burrow and that undefeated LSU team going up against Tua and a really talented Alabama team. I think it finished like 56-49 or something like that. Both teams are going up and down the field. Alabama had a late comeback that made it closer than we thought it was going to be. Basically, the Bama defense couldn't get off the field. Joe Burrow made play after play as a part of what I think may well be the greatest single season in the history of college football for LSU to go, 15-0 that year and have beaten so many high-quality competition along the way to get to crown the title, if I remember correctly, in New Orleans. And I remember that well because they won that championship in January of 2020. Then, about a month later, was and again, Adam can see if I remember all this correctly. Then about a month later was the Super Bowl in Miami in February of 2020, and then COVID happened. And everybody lost their minds, and everything got shut down, and those were the last two amazing sporting events that I remember attending and having a great time surrounding. We had the awesome LSU championship over Clemson in New Orleans in the Superdome down there, and LSU fans are going crazy in New Orleans. I remember that well because I got back and we taped the OutKick the Coverage morning show starting at like 3 a.m. and went straight through to like 6 a.m. We would do that sometimes instead of going to bed and then having to just get back up like an hour and a half later. I eventually got them to let me do that after big events that I attended. So that was awesome. And then a month later was the Super Bowl taking place in Miami, and then everything shut down. But this, to me, is the biggest game that Alabama has had in Tuscaloosa, in my opinion, since that 2019 game against Joe Burrow. In terms of the amount of attention that's going to be on it, in terms of all the focus. There have been a lot of big games during the Saban era, but to me, that 2019 game and now this one, I'm on Alabama plus the points, and I'm on the under. I'm sure that I will see a lot of you in Tuscaloosa. Should be an incredible scene. Should be a phenomenal weekend. I'll get down there Friday. I'm going to do Big Noon on Saturday. I'm going to be in the crowd with my son watching that game. Then we'll come back on Sunday. And let me say, I love being a dad. It's probably the best decision I've ever made, being a dad. I feel fortunate to have 3 boys. So when that 2019 game happened, and I think I wrote about it on OutKick at the time, but I remember that game very, very well. We were staying at a Comfort Inn and Suites in the Birmingham area because we were driving back. That was the 2:30 Central SEC kickoff game. And we didn't want to go all the way back, but we stayed there, drove in for the game. He was 9 years old then, and you want to talk about how crazy it is. 5 years, maybe I hope I don't look that much different. Some of you are like, you look 180. Well, maybe so. It's what having 3 kids and 40 jobs will do for you. But I drove him back to the hotel in, whatever it was, like November of 2019. And I said, okay, bud, what do you want to do? Do you want to – I think I gave him options. I said, you know what? I don't know what the Comfort Inn and Suites cost, like $120, not a massive amount. I said, we can spend the night here, you and me, or we can drive back and you can wake up on Sunday and we'll be home and we watch NFL games, whatever else. He said, no, Dad, I want to go back. I said, you can choose. I'll let you pick. He said, Dad, and I just remember thinking, man, this is a sign that that your kid's not that much different than you. He said, Dad, I want to go get food and I want to go back to the hotel room and I just want to watch college football for the rest of the night in the hotel room with you. And I remember Kentucky was playing Tennessee, if I remember correctly, up in Lexington. Jeremy Pruitt era. Tennessee got a goal line stand against Kentucky to win that game. And he had already fallen asleep. Like, he was 9 years old, but he had fallen asleep in the bed next to me, and I was trying to avoid making too much noise while I watched that game. But I said, okay, we'll do that. We'll go back, and we'll stay at the hotel, Comfort Inn and Suites there in the Birmingham area, whatever, on the north side, I think, maybe Fulton Dell for those of you who know. I said, what do you want to eat for dinner? I said, I'll take you. It's just you and me. I said, it's tough. I know you're an Alabama fan. You're 9 years old. Your team just lost to LSU. Tough loss. I said, I'll take you. We'll go eat wherever you want. And he said, I know exactly what I want, Dad. He said, I want Taco Bell and I want Bojangles. He said, I want tacos and I want chicken tenders. And so I kid you not, we went through the drive-thru, loaded up on chicken tenders, loaded up on tacos, went back to the Comfort Inn and Suites, sat down in front of the television, and just pounded tacos and chicken tenders while we watched college football that night. And now, I'm getting old, right? My kids are getting older. I got a 16, a 14. I still have a 10-year-old too. But now he's 14 years old, and it's just wild to me from 9 to 14 how much different he is. But I also think that there's probably a good chance that after this game, although it's ending late, he would still be super excited to get tacos and chicken tenders and watch college football games. And I think that's one reason why I love going on the road for college football, why I also think that so many of you are big college football fans, because as you age, you can see that entire sort of panoply of life experience. So if you're like me, you started going to college football games when you were 5 years old-ish, 6 years old. I got a buddy who says that he determines how old kids are by whether they can travel for a conference game or a non-conference game. Out of conference, not that serious. In fact, the buddy now has a son who plays for the University of Tennessee, Brad Lampley. I remember him making the argument. Your kids' age, you got out-of-conference age kids, you got conference age kids, and then you have big game kids. And those ages are different because you got to be really dialed in for the big game. Women, by the way, wear better clothes. Like they save their dress for the rival. The rival dress is better than the out-of-conference dress or the out-of-conference outfit. That's why I love college football. But you can experience all this. You can go from the 5-year-old who is just so excited to get to experience being in a big stadium like that and being on the road with dad or mom or grandma or grandpa, aunt, uncle, whoever it is. Then you get a little bit older and you can start to understand more what's going on in the game. You're running around with your friends, throwing football at the tailgates. Then you're teenage suddenly, and you're like, man, there's a lot of pretty girls that show up at these sporting events. I didn't know there were so many. This sundress thing, this is not a bad look. And then you get to be high school, college age, right? Which, then you're around the same age as the athletes themselves on the field. You're contemporaries, but, there's tons of kids your age going to the game. Maybe you're in college yourself. Parents come back to visit you for the weekend. Then you have you're in your 20s before you have kids, early 30s maybe, and you go back to games and you hang out with your buddies and you pretend you're still in college. Then the cycle of life is you have kids yourself. And you start taking them to those games. As I said before, you go through the out-of-conference games. Maybe you have to leave a little bit early. The game that starts in the day is different than the game that starts in the night. And your buddies start having friends, and you got that whole new generation of kids running around. And then eventually, you age into the point where you're the grandpa. You're the grandma. You are the older people at the tailgate now who hopefully have just a bevy of kids and grandkids that are running around that you are able to help shepherd to and from the stadium and to and from the tailgate. Man, that to me is college football life cycle. And as a fan, why it is just so amazing. And I'm thinking about that as I get ready tomorrow to go down. And I feel, for the Georgia-Alabama game, I feel incredibly fortunate. I probably don't talk about it enough. I somehow have created a life where for about 20 years, I've been able to go to the biggest college football games all year round. Over those 20 years, all fall for 20 years. And I don't take it for granted. I still a lot of times pinch myself on a game day when I get out of bed and I'm like, okay, I got to go do television today. or, oh, man, I got to go through security. I got to go sit in the press box. I got to write an article about what's going to happen on the field down in front of me, and I got perfect seats sitting at the 50-yard line, and somehow I'm getting paid to sit in air conditioning and watch college football game. So I don't take it for granted. I'm excited to get on the road Friday, be able to experience what happens. Georgia-Alabama game. Like I said, I've got Bama plus the points and the under. Let's see if I got all of those facts right. Adam tells me Georgia's 45-2 since the start of the 2021 season, and both of those losses are to Alabama. That's a crazy stat since 2021. I'm jotting that down because I'm going to write it in my did I say Alabama's 45-2? I obviously mean Georgia's 45-2 with both those losses to Alabama. So that's my thoughts on that game in general. Several other different stories out there. I just told you how much I love college football. The UNLV starting quarterback, 3-0 UNLV football team. UNLV beat Kansas, and they also beat somebody else pretty decent. They've gotten 2 good wins so far to start the year. Adam, let me know who the 3 wins UNLV has stuck together. But I know they beat Kansas, and then on a Friday in Kansas City, and then they hit a bye week. And they're playing against Fresno State, I believe, this weekend. Their quarterback came out late last night and said that he was going to redshirt and going to be transferring because he's not getting the money that he was promised by an assistant coach. Now, this has turned into a he said, she said. And the latest statement, this just came down about 30 minutes ago, from UNLV Athletics is football player Matthew Sluka's representatives made financial demands upon the university and its NIL collective in order to continue playing. UNLV Athletics interpreted these demands as a violation of the NCAA pay-for-play rules as well as Nevada state law. UNLV does not engage in such activity, nor does it respond to implied threats. UNLV has honored all previously agreed upon scholarships for Matthew Sluka. UNLV has conducted its due diligence and will continue to operate its programs within the framework of NCAA rules and regulations as well as Nevada state law. Now, quarterback says he was promised $100,000. There's nothing in writing. UNLV says they did not make that promise. And so he now is going to leave, and he is not going to be playing going forward for UNLV. This is a major problem, okay? Leave aside UNLV for the moment. And let's just by the way, UNLV beat Houston, Utah Tech, and Kansas. So as I'm running through all of this analysis of college football, keep in mind that while everybody likes to point at UNLV and people are going to choose sides and say, oh, he should have been paid this, should have been paid that, who's telling the truth, what are the stories, it's all a mess. And this could very easily happen at your favorite program as well. And let me explain big picture what needs to happen and what I see as the flaw embedded in what's happening right now. First of all, you cannot have a system, which is what we have right now, which is a purely capitalistic system where there is no restriction on transfer and effectively no binding NIL restrictions. So it's not, look, I think pay for play is fine. NIL is pay for play. Let's be honest. The idea of NIL was initially predicated on, hey, if Wendy's wants to pay you to endorse Wendy's, or if you want to get paid to sign an autograph for someone, or if the local car dealership wants to use your image on a billboard to advertise their vehicle, that is name, image, and likeness. Name, image, and likeness is actually just endorsement money. And it's not even that controversial, but name, image, and likeness is different than pay for play. We don't have NIL. Most college athletes have virtually no NIL knowledge. You may NIL value. You may care about who your starting point guard is or who your starting quarterback is, but those are the limited numbers. Most players don't have an NIL value. Heck, most pro athletes don't have an NIL value. Only like 5 or 6 guys in the NFL actually make any money off of some sort of endorsement income. Most players are relatively anonymous. That's even more true in college. So the original sin here is this isn't NIL, it's pay for play. I'm fine with athletes being paid to play, but don't label it NIL, okay? Secondly, look at every pro sports league in America. Almost all of them have a draft. They have contract limits, meaning salary caps, and you are not able to just say, hey, I'm done with this team, I'm going to walk out. Let me give you an example here locally of how this is not working. Puka Nacua, whose name I probably massacred, was, I believe, a 5th-round draft pick of the LA Rams. As a virtue of him being a 5th-round draft pick, he doesn't get paid very much money over the first 4 years of his contract. It's slotted. The Rams found a value proposition for him, and they are paying him less than he would be worth on the open market. But when his contract comes near expiration, or when he hits free agency, he's going to be rewarded with probably tens of millions of dollars in additional payment. But not until his contract initially comes up for grabs. Look at what happened with, I believe, Adam, make sure I get his name right, London Humphreys. In my backyard, I know the name because Vanderbilt signed him, 3-star wide receiver. True freshman, he went out and balled out against Georgia. Kirby Smart saw him play and said, I want this guy. In the offseason, he called up, or his collective did, or whatever else, and they got in touch with London Humphreys, and they signed him away. He left Vanderbilt. He went to Georgia. Vanderbilt gets nothing. Okay? If the LA Rams find a diamond in the rough and they draft him, they get the benefit of his play for 4 years. In almost every college in America right now, if you find a diamond in the rough, they can leave you immediately and you get virtually nothing for them. Why do I raise that as an issue? It's a broken economic system. If you're not a power team with tons of NIL money, and again, NIL is really just pay for play, if you're not one of those teams, you're actually better off if your freshmen aren't that good and don't play, because if you put them on the field and they're actually good, if you find the equivalent of Puka Nacua and you put him on the field as a freshman at a smaller school and he dominates, somebody else comes along and signs him and you get no benefit, right? If the Rams traded Puka now because he has a low-cost contract, they would get a bunch of draft picks back. There's no incentive structure for finding diamonds in the rough and paying them. Also, this is a crazy stat. My fantasy football quarterback is Mr. Irrelevant, Brock Purdy. Brock Purdy was drafted at the very end of the 7th round. He now is the starting quarterback of the San Francisco 49ers. Brock Purdy's going to make $985,000 this year. The average SEC quarterback, the average college quarterback in the SEC that is starting is making over $1 million, according to a Wall Street Journal article. Some of them are making $2 or $3 million. How is it possible that a guy who was one of the final candidates to be MVP in the NFL is making less money to play for the San Francisco 49ers than a mid-tier quarterback in the SEC is making this year? It's a broken system. So my solution, and by the way, I am going to have to talk a lot more about Biden tomorrow, and I'm going to have to talk a lot more about Iran wanting to kill Trump because I got so fired up about this and talking about the college football. My solution is you can't have unlimited transfers and you can't have pay for play. You can have one or the other, but you can't have both. And you're going to, like, I'm already looking down the line. It is an inevitability that college football is going to have a salary cap, and that individual players are going to be paid as employees, and they're going to sign contracts instead of what's going on right now, which is the total Wild West, where a player, in theory, can walk in the middle of the season and say, unless I get more money, I'm not going to play in insert game against a big rival. It just isn't a tenable result. So that is where I think we're headed. That is, I think, more than anything else, the situation that we find ourselves in. We're going to have to figure it out as college football fans. But in the meantime, I love college football. People are still watching in record numbers, and I guarantee you that the Georgia-Alabama audience is going to be through the roof, especially if, as I anticipate, this game is going to be both low-scoring, competitive, and close throughout. Again, I'm on Bama, and I am on the under. All right, in a little bit, we're going to do a story with a gambling special, although I've been getting killed in gambling so far this year. Going to do a gambling special, as we do every single week, with the fade. We're taping it a day early because Kelly Stewart is worried about whether she might lose power from, I think it's Hurricane Francine or whatever it's called, that's supposedly working its way up through the Florida Gulf Coast. And so we will talk and tape with her a day early. Tomorrow, I'll dive into why Biden suddenly is talking to everybody, Butler PA failures, Iran wanting to kill Trump, and Joe Biden as George Washington. We'll have some fun with that on the Thursday edition of OutKick. In the meantime, I'm Clay Travis. DBAP, unless you need to SBAP. This has been OutKick, the show.